Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us at this presentation this morning of the findings and the results of our 16th quarterly survey into the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. I'm joined, as usual, by our longtime collaborator, Dr. Ben Rosher, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Liverpool. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to try and share screen. And hopefully you can see my screen. So my name is Aidan Campbell. I'm the Research Programme Development Manager here at the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation. And this is the 16th quarterly survey now that we've done. And the survey really is a vital means to give us an understanding of the extent to which the necessary conditions for North-South cooperation are being maintained and how relations between civic society organisations and local authorities on the island of Ireland and Great Britain are being safeguarded following the end of the Brexit transition period and the implementation of the protocol on Ireland/Northern Ireland, or I suppose Windsor Framework, as it's more commonly known now. And just to remind ourselves, we're talking here, I suppose, about the period between the 1st of October and December 31st, 2024. That was the time period we were seeking respondents' views on in this quarter. So the survey is aimed specifically at civic society organisations and local authorities. And there's a reason for that. It's because really the mapping exercise that was undertaken of North-South cooperation in 2017 by the UK and the EU overlooked some of the cooperation that those organisations are involved in. And a technical note that came out after that North-South cooperation mapping exercise did say that further areas of informal, local and community level cooperation were not captured or may not have been captured by that exercise. And we think it's really important that local community and local authority, informal, grassroots, cross-border cooperation that was missed during that mapping process is really the lifeblood of cross-border cooperation. And we think it's really important that we survey, I suppose, the state of how that's happening and the health of cross-border cooperation, both north-south and east-west. So that's why we specifically target civic society and local authorities in this survey rather than looking at a wider constituency of respondents. So as usual, during this point in our presentation of the results of these surveys, we have to send a big thank you to, especially to the organisations, all those who've responded to the survey, and especially those who've responded in previous quarters. And Ben will probably talk a bit about that when he's going through the results in terms of the cohort of respondents. But that consistency of people who've responded over like nearly 3 years now, Ben, is it over 3 years?
Yeah, I think now since January 2021, so 4 years. Yeah,
4 years almost. So that gives us a great insight into how people's sentiments in relation to cross-border cooperation have fluctuated over that period of time. So this piece of work isn't possible without the people who have responded to the survey and responded consistently, sharing their views, sharing their opinions, and how those have fluctuated over the years. The context and the relationships for this work are changing all the time. Obviously, in the last 6 months or a year, we've had a new UK government. There's been elections in the Irish Republic. There's obviously a US new president in the US who may be or may not be affecting the conditions for north, south, and east west cooperation here in the future, and that's reflected, I think, in some of the opinions expressed in the survey. But I suppose the point is the context changes all the time, And this survey is, I suppose, our way of exploring how that change in political, social, economic, and regulatory context affects groups undertaking cross-border cooperation on the ground. So we need your ongoing help in responding to future surveys so that we can raise the issues that are important to you. It's important to say, like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And the change in context will affect cross-border cooperation as we go forward into the future. So in terms of the information that we get from this survey, it's really important to us at the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, or sorry, Cross-Border Cooperation, as we work with other organisations to protect North-South and East-West relations and cooperation, not least through the ad hoc group for North-South and East-West cooperation, which the Centre convenes. So the responses are used. We raise issues with both UK government representatives and the EU in various meetings that we're involved in. And we try to find with them solutions to issues that are emerging. And this survey is also a crucial of importance in terms of flagging up issues that, while they may not be problems currently, potentially could evolve into issues down the line if they're not addressed, and could affect North-South or East-West cooperation. So the information that organisations are providing to us through this survey just doesn't sit in the briefing report that is compiled by Ben. We actively, and our stakeholders and organisations that we work with, actively use the information to try to address the issues that are coming up and that are affecting North-South cooperation on the ground, and East-West cooperation as well. So at this stage, I think now I'm going to hand over to Ben to take it away and to take us through the results of the 16th survey. Ben, over to you.
Thanks very much, Aidan. Hello, everyone. Hello to those of you who joined us before, and welcome to anybody joining us for the first time. Now, today I'm going to give a general overview of the results of the 16th quarterly survey on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. Fuller analysis is available in the research briefing, which will be made available on the website shortly. Today, I'm going to start off just giving an explanation of the data and a breakdown of the respondents to this round of the survey. And then I'll spend most of the time focusing on the substantive parts of the analysis, which focus on the experiences and perceptions of cross-border contacts, cooperation and collaboration, both in the North-South and East-West dimensions. So in this round of the survey, 87% of respondents have completed at least one previous round of the survey. And as we were just mentioning, that the survey has been repeated every quarter since the start of 2021, and that we have had for some time now a consistently high number of repeat respondents. It helps us to infer with good clarity the shape of some trends around the views and experience of the protocol in the Windsor framework and the post-Brexit landscape across these islands against an ever-changing contextual background. The insights that we get from the quantitative dimensions of the survey are further developed through the inclusion of qualitative responses to the central contextual questions. And this allows for more nuanced insights into how respondents are experiencing the changing political, social, regulatory, and material conditions, as well as suggestions for concrete ways to improve these environments. And as I was saying, this information doesn't just sit with us, but it's something that we feed backwards and upwards into meetings so that it provides invaluable in painting a more detailed picture of the current context for cross-border collaboration. Now, as always, it does need to be appreciated that respondents to this survey and every round of the survey have a wealth of inside experience and expertise in cross-border cooperation and collaboration. The people who respond to the surveys are practitioners and experts in the field. And so the results need to be considered with that in mind. Now, in terms of this round of the survey, the data has been collected between the 2nd of December last year to the 10th of January this year, and has gathered 30 responses in total. say 87% of those reported that they completed at least one previous round of the survey. For this round, 43% of respondents were based in the Republic, 43% were based in Northern Ireland, and 13% have a presence on both sides of the border. So we have a very balanced view of the situation in this round of the survey. If we look first of all at the North-South context, in this quarter, 70% of respondents have reported that they've had meetings with organisations in the other jurisdiction on the island of Ireland. Now, for 63% of respondents, their level of contact this quarter has been at the same as the last quarter, and it's increased for 30% of respondents. Now, 80% of respondents have reported that their meetings with organisations in the other jurisdiction discuss challenges to cross-border cooperation on occasion for 48% of respondents, and to a significant extent for 33% of respondents. And as ever, the nature of the challenges discussed are varied, but this time round they focus particularly on concerns around policy divergence between the UK and Ireland. For example, one respondent said that policy divergence, for example, around tobacco and vapes and legislation in the UK will diverge from tobacco control policy in Ireland in the coming years, and that is likely to be an issue. At present, 77% of respondents are currently involved in cross-border collaborations with a partner in the other jurisdiction, and 63% of respondents are actively considering new collaborative projects. This around 44% of respondents who are presently engaged in cross-border collaboration reported that they were in receipt of funding specifically for those projects. And most of the funding was coming from the Irish government. Nevertheless, this is a decrease from the usual response rate. Normally we get around 60% of respondents say that they are receiving funding for these projects. That this has dropped by nearly 20% is something that does need to be monitored going forward to make sure that there isn't anything systematically that's impacting funding for North-South collaboration. If we look to the perceptions for the contextual environment for cooperation and collaboration, first the political context. 27% of respondents believe that the political context for cross-border cooperation has improved on the previous quarter. While 63% said stayed more or less the same. And obviously this needs to be considered in context of the elections in Ireland and the elections in the US and the still relatively new Labour government in the UK. So in terms of political context, there is a lot that is new and taking time to bed in. When we've asked respondents to develop on their responses to this question, most did point to the elections in Ireland and the US as adding uncertainty to the political situation. One person said that the impact of the US election has focused the minds on rights and democracy, more awareness of the dangers of far activism in communities, and misinformation. With regard to the social context, 67% of respondents say that it has remained the same on the previous quarter, and 17% say it's improved. One respondent observed that there is some indication that civil society groups are coming together to strengthen civic engagement on common issues such as housing and homelessness and poverty and health. And so there is progress being made in the social sphere. However, one lamented that it's seen as less of a priority in terms of other more immediate critical impacts, such as new national insurance requirements, ongoing economic downturn, and seemingly insufficient Northern Irish budget. And so it's, as ever, is competing with other priorities. Looking at the regulatory context, 80% of respondents say that it has remained the same compared to the last quarter, with 10% saying they're not sure if or how it has changed. One respondent said that the reason for this is that the Windsor framework's outworkings continue to have an effect, but it will probably take time for these to bed in and judge the long-term impact. And so, despite the fact we are now 4 years on from when the UK actually left the EU, the new reality is still taking time to bed in, and there is still consistent change going on, which is why we keep needing to do these surveys to make sure that we're understanding how these changes are impacting as they do bed in. When we've asked respondents for concrete suggestions they have for improving the conditions in the north-south dimension, there were some people who suggested the need for improved rail infrastructure. One person said that data protection standards in Northern Ireland should not be diminished below minimum EU standards. And another said that there should be a structured leadership program and other formal networking initiatives, as well as policy review, scaling, replication, etc., across the third sector. Looking now towards the East-West dimension, in this quarter, only 43% of respondents reported to have meetings with organisations in Great Britain. For 63% of respondents, this was the same level of contact as the previous quarter, and was an increase for 26% of respondents. So again, we can see that the level of contact between East-West is considerably lower than that North-South, and that's something we've seen consistently, and it's something we're very attuned to. 54% of respondents reported that their meetings with partners in GB discussed challenges to cooperation on occasion for 46%, or to a significant extent for 8%. And the nature of these challenges were primarily focused on either experienced or perceived incompatibility in Northern Irish and GB legislation. One person said that data protection equivalence and regulatory divergence in the context of food nutritional labelling at retail is a particular cause of concern right now. This quarter, 50% of respondents say they are currently involved in collaboration with a GB-based organisation, but only 43% of respondents are actively considering initiating new collaborative projects with organisations in Great Britain. So again, considerably less than we see in the North-South dimension. However, only 40% of respondents currently engaged in East-West collaborative projects have reported that their organisation is in receipt of funding for those projects. So at this point, it's the same as the North-South dimension. But this has been longer term for East-West. It's a barrier we've seen consistently since we started doing these surveys in 2021. And so whether funding needs to be made aware, or the application process funding needs to be aware, or the awareness of the funding that does exist needs to be made more public, both governments have a duty to make sure that there is funding available and that people are aware of and supported in accessing those funding pots in order to develop the East-West dimension for cooperation and collaboration. Looking to the perceptions of the contextual environment, East-West, in terms of the political context, 70% of respondents believe that the political context has remained the same since the previous quarter, and 20% said it's improved. And again, when we've asked people to develop on this, they've indicated the new governments in the UK, Ireland, and USA were a source of uncertainty. One person has elaborated on this further, saying, "It was expected that the incoming Labour government would deliver a policy agenda that recognises the importance of the third sector, particularly in respect of supporting development of its physical infrastructure. Labour has withdrawn from the Community Ownership Fund, and there is no clarity as to whether it will initiative an inter-regional programme in this regard going forward. Labour's emphasis on further regional devolution suggests that there will be little forthcoming that will strengthen inter-regional national collaboration." Looking to the social context, 70% of respondents have said that it remains the same as the previous quarter, and 13% have reported an improvement. And when we've asked people to develop on their experiences of the social dimension, one respondent said that our own relationship with our sister network in England, Scotland, and Wales remains strong, and resources made available to the DTNI through the Joint Fund has allowed us to connect to third sector organisations with their counterparts in Great Britain. So we can see that when people are able to avail of the funding that is available, it is having positive impacts. We just need to see more of that coming through. Looking at the regulatory context, 63% of respondents say that it has stayed the same over last quarter, but 20% reported a deterioration. And one respondent has lamented that there is no clarity on successor programmes to the UK shared prosperity, including community ownership, no statements on UK commitments to ownership except for the highly stated right to buy for communities, which exists only in England, and that the emphasis from Westminster appears to favour policy and programme initiatives that are region specific. And now, finally, when considering the material context, 63% report that the context has remained the same on the previous quarter, and 17% report that it has deteriorated. One respondent reported the challenges associated with recent regulation coming into force of UK businesses registering as trusted suppliers for Northern Irish trade. However, one commented that it's improved in the sense that the DTNI is drawing and sharing service delivery experience with its UK counterparts. So DTNI is doing well this quarter, at least. When we've asked for suggestions for improvements in the East-West dimension, one person has said that the Shared Island Fund could look at the opportunities to invest in civic infrastructure to lead on North-South and East-West programmes. DTNI is keen to engage its southern partner Carmichael and its UK partners, the UK Family of Development Trust networks in England, Scotland and Wales to this end. And this has been discussed amongst partners and there is an appetite for it. So again, DTNI is coming up good. Now, just as the last point, since the Assembly was restored a year ago now, we've been asking people what their experiences of the restored Executive Assembly are and what they would like to see from the Executive Assembly. One respondent this time has said that it is a positive development overall, but it's being strangled by the shortage in funding. Another has said that restarting of North, South and East West institutions has created vehicles for discussing and addressing issues, which I think has restored some confidence. And a third has said that the language between the different entities seems to be more positive, and now there are new figures in all the main appointments, so good time to reset and be more ambitious. The completion of the All-Ireland Rail Review on both sides was a success in terms of cooperation and intent. The test will be in terms of implementation. Should get it done and increase connectivity. So just to bring us to a close and summarize then, the landscape, both north, south and east, west, is broadly stable at the moment. We're seeing predominantly now for the last 3 quarters, people are saying that things have remained broadly the same. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, considering where we were in 21, 22, 23, when everything was consistently been perceived as deteriorating. Towards the end of 2023 and through 2024, most things were being perceived as improving, and that we've reached a sense of stability is no bad thing in of itself. However, as we've said, things are constantly changing, and so response to this survey, we expressed concerns that the election in UK and Ireland, and particularly the USA, are a source of uncertainty. And at this point, all eyes are looking west to see what the Trump administration has in store for these islands. I would say this is going to be particularly concerning for the Republic of Ireland, for the South, given its tax regime and how reliant it is on multinationals being based in Ireland, and Trump's disdain for anything he perceives as unfair in that regard could cause some issues not that far down the line. In terms of collaboration east and west, or rather north and south, is far more robust than east and west, and that has been consistent throughout these surveys. And the government of Westminster need to ensure that funding is made available and opportunities are promoted for east-west cooperation. And with that, I shall finish up. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.
Ben, thanks so much for taking us through the findings of that survey. I'm going to stop the share of the slides. Yeah, hopefully, yeah, you're seeing that fine. Ben, thanks a million for that headline tour through the findings of the survey. Just a couple of issues maybe to pick up on. The East-West cooperation, I guess, is a perennial, or it has been a perennial thing. I know I've only presented, I'm fairly new in the organisation, so I've presented over these surveys over the last 3 quarters. And I suppose the last quarter saw some movement at the high political level with the first meeting of the new Council of Nations and Regions, which the Deputy First Minister and the First Minister here attended. It was in Edinburgh. All the devolved administrations were represented. The English mayors were at it. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, was at it. So at that high level, there seems to be some, movement towards, in theory anyway, better East-West cooperation, but it's obviously not coming through. There doesn't seem to be a sense, certainly in this survey, of that impact at civic society level yet. In fact, the results were saying, if I was picking you up right, in terms of regulatory context and material context for East-West cooperation, there was some deterioration.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a recurring theme. We did see, I suppose, one comment coming through in terms of DTNI consistently, where they were
Yeah,
able to access funding that they seem to be benefiting and getting great value from their connections with development trusts in Britain. So apart from, is there anything else that we need to be saying or pointing up in terms of issues, apart from obviously the need to support that type of work?
yeah, it's to support the type of work. It's to make for both governments to make funding available. So it's not just incumbent on Westminster; it's also the Irish government needs to make funding available for cooperation East-West. I think a lot of it is to publicize it effectively because obviously there is funding or some funding available. Whether that's enough, it's never really enough. Um, but it needs to be made. It needs to be better publicized, and there needs to be programs put in place that help people through the application process to access these funding pots because trying to apply for funding takes a long time. It takes a lot of resources. And so we need to be training people so they're not spending unnecessary amount of time to apply for funding, but that they know what notes they need to hit to get to access these funding pots. And so I think that is where there is an easy win 'cause to set up a training course for third sector organizations to apply for funding isn't a huge task in and of itself, but the payout will be considerable.
Yeah. And in terms of north-south cooperation, I mean, there is, and we are picking up then that sense of frustration that the financial constraints that the Northern Ireland Executive are facing is holding back, despite the work, good work of groups on the ground and local authorities on the ground.
Yeah.
That there is that sense of frustration that absence of support from on the Northern Ireland side. Obviously, you have the Shared Island Fund on the southern side, is holding back north-south cooperation to some extent.
Yeah, and given where funding pressures are in Northern Ireland after so much of an absence of Stormont, obviously healthcare is a priority, and so the funding will be directed towards the NHS. The cost of living is a priority, housing is a priority. It makes sense that healthcare is a priority, I suppose.
Hmm. And I suppose the final point just to reflect on, and we're only, I mean, the period that the survey was covering was from October to December. So
Yeah.
obviously the American election had happened, but President Trump was very much president-elect at that stage. And I suppose there is that sense of trepidation as to how decisions that the new president and his administration are going to make will affect international trade, international relations, geopolitics, the implications that has then for the Irish Britain relationship, the Britain EU relationship, and those relationships with America is, I guess, something that is an unknown at the moment.
Yeah, as much as Keir Starmer doesn't want to have to choose between Europe and the US, at some point he's going to likely have to make a choice on that. Trump obviously has a particular disdain for what he perceives as unfairness in trade deficits, which the UK is actually kind of okay on that one. We don't really have a trade deficit or a surplus with the US. We're fairly balanced. But I think the um the Irish tax regime in the way it relies on US multinationals is likely to become a
Mm.
problem sooner rather than later. So we'll have to see
Yeah.
what the shake of
Well,
that is.
yeah, obviously the Irish economy is a very open economy, and we've seen before it's been very exposed to sort of global fluctuations and global downturns, maybe more so than Northern Ireland, which is more public sector oriented,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well, Ben, thanks a million for that, and
Thank
thanks a
you.
million for presenting the survey. The survey will be up online later in the week, and accompanying the survey will be the research briefing, which goes into a lot more detail. But for now, we'll thank Ben again for presenting and for doing the work on the research briefing, and we look forward to seeing you at the end of the next quarter.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you.